These are the differences between English and Ukrainian that probably are not that obvious to you. They will prove that a foreign language is not just a different grammar or vocabulary, it's a foreign world. Possessive pronouns. The thing is that possessive pronouns are not used that often in Ukrainian. For example, in English you can say, he put his hand in his pocket. But in Ukrainian you would just say, he put hand in pocket. I mean, for Ukrainians it's understandable and obvious that it was his hand and his pocket. He could not put somebody else's hand in somebody else's pocket. So unless it's really needed, possessive pronouns are not used in such sentences. Describing location. Of course, in English there are words like standing, sitting, hanging, and so on. But unless it's an important detail, they are not used. Instead, you could say just is. The cup is on the table. But in Ukrainian, it's important to say that the cup is standing on the table, even if it's not an important detail. So if you want to say that the picture is on the wall, in Ukrainian you would say picture is hanging on the wall. Why is it so important? Nobody knows. Passive voice. Passive voice does exist in Ukrainian grammar, but it's avoided. I remember when I was at school and we were writing an essay, our Ukrainian language teacher always said to avoid the passive voice when it's possible. You see, for passive voice you need participle too, which can be formed from any verb in English. But number of participles in Ukrainian is very, very limited. In this sentence, loved is participle, but it just doesn't exist in Ukrainian. Usage of prepositions. In English, it's okay to put prepositions at the end of questions, but in Ukrainian, they should always stand in front of the question word. If you need to ask, who are you talking to? In Ukrainian, you would ask, to who are you talking? The same applies to affirmative sentences. Man about who you are talking instead of man you are talking about. We just don't put prepositions at the end. Verbs plus prepositions. Both in Ukrainian and in English, there are verbs that require prepositions and verbs that do not require prepositions. For example, in the sentence, I'm listening to music, the verb to listen requires the preposition to. In English, but not in Ukrainian. In Ukrainian, you would say, I'm listening music without to. But there is another example. In English, you would say, I'm playing football, but in Ukrainian you need to say, I'm playing in football. Я граю в футбол. So even if you know the translation of a verb, you need to know what preposition it requires, if it does. Phrasal verbs. If you translate English phrasal verbs into Ukrainian, you will see no prepositions, because unlike English, Ukrainian doesn't need them. Instead, Ukrainian verbs just change prefixes. For example, if you want to translate to jump up into Ukrainian, you would get the verb підстрибнути with the prefix pід. Gerunds. There is no such thing as gerund in Ukrainian grammar, but there is a very similar thing. Віддієслівний іменник, which is a noun that comes from verb. So we can say that gerunds exist in Ukrainian, but they are not used the same way. And in many cases they are avoided. For example, instead of saying I like reading in Ukrainian, you would say I like to read. It would sound more natural. So instead of saying я люблю читання with the gerund, it's better to say я люблю читати with the infinitive. Articles. There are no articles in Ukrainian, but usually it's understandable from the context if it's the dog or a dog. But in the situations where it's not that obvious, you can use the words say, this, and той, that. You can also use the word якийсь, which means some. Constructions. If you have a sentence with complex object, complex subject, or forward to infinitive construction, and you try to translate it into Ukrainian, just translating it word by word, you will get an absolutely confusing sentence in Ukrainian. So the sentence "he was said to be talented" in Ukrainian would sound more like "they said about him that he was talented." It may seem too long, but it is what it is. Subjects. Unlike English sentences, Ukrainian sentences do not always require a subject. If the doer of the action is unknown, the sentence may stay without a subject. Like in this sentence, "it is snowing outside," we don't actually know who is snowing outside. It is not the real performer of the action. And in English we need to put some kind of subject, but in Ukrainian it's not necessary. Word order. Word order in Ukrainian is not that strict. You can change position of words in a sentence and still it will be understandable. I have already made a separate video about word order in Ukrainian. You can check it out if you want. I'll put the link in the description. The verb to be. In English we usually cannot skip the verb to be, but we can do this easily in Ukrainian. I hope this information was useful. If you are interested in learning Ukrainian, check out my shorts. I post Ukrainian word of the day and Ukrainian song of the day every day. You can leave your feedback or you can request a video in the comments below. Have a nice day!